The stars were quiet the night the war began. No one on Earth knew that far away, in the heart of the galaxy, a powerful empire was falling apart. The Ilari people had ruled dozens of star systems for thousands of years. Their princess, Vareya, was beloved across the empire. But peace had made the empire soft. When the Dreth came, they came like a virus, spreading fire across planets and slaughtering everything in their path. Princess Vareya watched her world burn from the royal citadel. Her council was dead, her guards were gone, and the poison running through her veins was slow but certain. She had been cursed by a Dreth weapon, a bioweapon made to target her species' royal bloodline. No Ilari medicine could cure it, and the last remaining doctor said she had weeks, maybe days. On Earth, war news came late. The humans had only recently joined the interstellar community. They were still considered primitive by most species. But when the galactic emergency call went out, Earth answered. Not with diplomats or ships of glory, but with a few brave volunteers. Among them was a soldier named Dax Kellen. He had no noble title, no rank worth mentioning. He had fought in deserts and jungles, but never in space. He signed up because he had no family left. Earth had nothing to offer him anymore. He thought maybe dying on an alien world was better than slowly disappearing back home. By the time Dax reached the Ilari homeworld, the skies were red with fire. The palace had been bombed, the cities were crumbling, and Princess Vareya had gone missing. Rumors said she was captured. Others said she was already dead. Dax didn't care about the rumors. His only orders were to search, survive, and extract any remaining allies. He moved through the burning ruins with only his rifle, his gear, and a strange feeling in his gut. Something told him he wasn't going to die on this world. Not yet. He found bodies, Ilari civilians, some barely adults. He also found signs of resistance. Someone was still fighting back. And whoever it was, they were skilled. Deep beneath the palace ruins, in a secret chamber covered by debris and ash, Vareya lay on a cold bed of crystal. Her breath was shallow, her skin had turned pale blue. The royal jewel that once glowed in her chest now flickered dimly. Her personal guards had died protecting the chamber's entrance. She had been alone for days. Dax found the entrance by accident. He heard the hum of power behind a broken wall and followed it. He didn't expect to find royalty. He expected to find a trap. But when he saw her lying there dying, something clicked in him. She wasn't just another alien. She was someone he had to protect. Her eyes opened slowly when she heard footsteps. She tried to sit up, but the pain shot through her body. She gasped, barely able to speak. Her voice was weak but sharp, shaped by command and pain. She asked if he had come to finish her. Dax dropped his weapon and told her no. He gave her water, wrapped her in his coat. Her breathing steadied, but the glow in her chest kept fading. She told him the truth. She was dying from a weapon made to kill only her kind. A poison that couldn't be removed. Dax didn't speak, he just listened. And when she stopped, she looked at him and said, "Something strange," she said. "There's one way to break the curse, but it requires the blood of a living soul willing to give everything." Dax didn't ask questions. He didn't ask what everything meant. He looked at her and simply nodded. She tried to stop him. Said it was madness. Said he didn't understand the price. But Dax wasn't thinking with logic. He was thinking with instinct. And for the first time in a long time, he had something to fight for. He wasn't going to let her die. Not like this. Not alone. Not while he still had breath in his lungs. Outside, the Dreth were closing in. Their ships circled above like vultures. The palace walls shook with every strike. Dax knew they didn't have much time. If he was going to act, he had to do it now. And whatever this ritual was, it had better work. He asked her what to do. She placed her hand on the glowing gem in her chest. Then she touched his arm, gently. The air around them began to shimmer. The ground pulsed with energy. And a voice not hers began to speak from the walls. It said, "One life must be given freely, so another may rise. This is the bond of royal sacrifice." Dax closed his eyes and took a deep breath. In that moment, he knew what he had to do. He didn't flinch, he didn't back away. He held her hand tighter and said one word. "Do it." Dax felt heat rush through his chest as the ritual began. The chamber lit up with alien light, symbols dancing on the walls in a language he didn't understand. Energy circled them both, pulling at their skin, their blood, their minds. The gem in her chest pulsed once, then again, and then it surged, pouring its glow into Dax's body. Varaya screamed. Not from pain, but from the ancient bond awakening. Inside her, her body began to change. The sickly color faded. Her skin flushed back to its natural glow. Her breath deepened. Her strength returned slowly. But the ritual wasn't finished. Not until the offering was complete. Dax dropped to one knee, his heartbeat slowing, his vision blurred. The pain wasn't sharp, it was heavy. Like his body was giving up something sacred. He tried to breathe, but his chest felt crushed. Varaya's eyes widened as she saw the toll it was taking. "No," she whispered, reaching for him. "You can't give it all. You don't even know who I am." Dax looked at her through half-closed eyes and gave a tired smile. "You're someone who didn't deserve to die alone," he said. "That's enough for me." The bond flared once more. Then it snapped inward like a star collapsing. Light exploded through the chamber, and silence followed. The crystal walls dimmed. The voices vanished. And both of them collapsed into darkness. When Dax woke, he was lying on a cold floor, weak but alive. He blinked, disoriented. Above him, the princess hovered, her hands glowing faintly, healing his wounds with her touch. She looked down at him with an expression of awe and fear. Something ancient had changed between them. "I don't understand," he whispered. "I thought I was supposed to die." She helped him sit up and said softly, "You didn't die. But you're no longer what you were." He stared at his hand. His veins glowed faintly blue. He felt heavier, but not weaker. Like something powerful now lived inside him. "You carry part of me now," Varaya said. "And I carry part of you. We are joined by the blood bond. Our lives are no longer separate." Dax blinked. That wasn't what he expected. He didn't come here to become part of an alien legend. He came to save someone. Above them, the palace shook again. The Dreth weren't finished. The ritual had bought them time, not safety. Varaya stood, stronger now. Her crown gleamed with new fire. The gem in her chest shone brightly, restored fully. But her expression turned hard. She walked to a hidden wall and pressed her palm against it. The crystal door opened, revealing a suit of armor, ancient and silver blue, made for a royal warrior. She reached in and took it piece by piece, suiting up like a queen going to war. Dax watched silently. Her posture had changed. She wasn't dying anymore. She was preparing to fight. She turned to him and offered a curved blade, glowing with the same blue light now in his veins. "You gave your life to save mine," she said. "Now we fight together." Dax took the weapon without hesitation. It felt familiar, as if it was made for his hand. His heart still ached, but he was steady. He stood beside her without words. They left the chamber through a hidden passage, moving through crumbling halls lit by fire and falling stone. Outside, the city was chaos. The Dreth had sent war beasts to finish the destruction. Towering creatures with dark armor roared as they smashed through the remains of the capital, but the people were not all gone. Some Alari soldiers still lived. And when they saw their princess alive, walking through smoke with a glowing blade and a strange human beside her, they dropped to one knee. Hope returned to their eyes for the first time in days. Varaya raised her weapon and gave the command. No more hiding, she said. We take back what is ours. Dax stood beside her, silent but ready. The wind whipped through the streets. Fires crackled. And the battle began anew. With Dax leading a flank and Virea in the center, they pushed through the city's edge. The bond between them burned brighter the closer they fought. It wasn't just magic. It was instinct, shared breath, mirrored. Movement. They weren't two people anymore. They were one purpose. Dax saved her from a war beast's crushing blow. She covered his back with a sweep of energy blades. They moved like flame and steel. The Dreth were not prepared. Not for this. Not for a reborn princess and a half-human warrior now pulsing with royal blood. By nightfall, the city's heart was theirs again. The flag of the Ilari flew high above the palace ruins. But the war was far from over. They had won a battle. Not the war, and both of them knew it. The bond had bought them more than life, it had bought them time. The enemy regrouped in the outer rings of the city. Dreth command ships floated in the smoky skies, dropping reinforcements into the ruins. The beasts they unleashed were not just soldiers, but machines made from bone and metal, each pulsing with red energy. They were not coming to conquer. They were coming to erase. Inside the throne chamber, Virea stood before the fractured remains of her family seat. The once golden throne was cracked down the middle. She placed her hand on it, her jaw tight. They burned my world, she sighed. Now I will burn theirs. Dax watched her from the shadows of a broken pillar. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The bond between them told her what he felt. Pain, anger, resolve. He had not come to be part of a royal war. But now he was in it, deep. And there was no turning back. The Ilari commanders knelt before their princess. She no longer looked like a dying royal. Her armor gleamed. Her voice was fire. They pledged loyalty again, but one general stepped forward. His face was scarred, his voice cautious. With respect, your grace, the blood bond is forbidden. You've tied your life to an outsider. Virea met his eyes. That outsider gave me his life willingly. Without him, I would be dead. Without me, we are already lost. The room fell silent. Dax didn't move. He didn't even blink. The general looked at him, then nodded slowly. They needed a plan. The city was only the beginning. If the Dreth took the core planets, the war was finished. But Virea knew something the others didn't. The Dreth had one weakness, their queen. She was not just a leader. She was the source of their power. And she had come to Ilari space herself. Killing her would break their control. Without her, the war beasts would go silent, the machines would fall. The plague would end. But reaching her was suicide. Her flagship hovered behind the shield wall of a fallen moon, guarded by hundreds of ships. No one could reach her by force. No one but two. Virea revealed a secret route known only to her family. An ancient Ilari gate system buried beneath the planet. Dangerous, unstable, forgotten. But it could take two souls directly to the enemy's moon. It would bypass the front entirely. But once inside, there would be no backup, no rescue. Only one path forward. Dax listened carefully, then looked her in the eye. I'm going, he said. You don't even have to ask, she nodded. I was never going to ask. I'm going with you. The commanders protested, screamed, begged, but she had made her choice. Her crown meant nothing if her people died. And her people had no future without her. They descended into the tunnels together, alone. The deeper they went, the more alien the walls became. The light was dim and blue. Symbols flickered and shifted as they walked past. Dax felt a strange pull in his chest. The bond was alive here, stronger, older than he could understand. At the gate's end was a platform of stone and stars. Energy hummed above it. A portal crackled in the air like water standing upright. Virea took Dax's hand. Once we go through, we can't come back, she said. I never planned to, he replied. She smiled faintly. The portal opened wider. They stepped through together. The moon's surface was cold and black, covered in towers of bone and iron. Red lights blinked across the sky. A thick fog rolled across the broken ground. Above them hovered the Dreth flagship, like a massive black spider clinging to the stars. Dax crouched low. His weapon was drawn. Varaya moved beside him with blades ready. The bond between them pulsed. Stronger with every step, they didn't speak. They didn't need to. Their thoughts were one now. The closer they came to danger, the more their minds sensed. Guards patrolled the outer ring. Biomechanical monsters sniffed the air. Dax moved quickly, silently. Varaya covered him from the shadows. They slipped past the first checkpoint. Then, the second, but the third was a trap. A beast lunged. Dax fired once. It screamed but did not fall. Varaya leaped, slicing through its head with her energy blade. But the alarm triggered. Red lights flared across the towers. The ground shook. They ran. There was no more hiding. The enemy knew they were here, but they were close now. One last hallway. One last gate between them and the Dreth Queen. They burst into the chamber at the center of the ship. There, on a throne of black thorns, sat the Queen. Her body was tall, slender, wrapped in shadow and armor. Her eyes were burning rubies. Her voice was low and sharp like a blade. You brought the broken bloodline here to die, she hissed. And you brought a human with stolen life. How noble. How foolish. Varaya stepped forward. We came to end you, she said. The Queen rose. The Dreth Queen stepped down from her throne of thorns. Her feet made no sound on the cold black floor, but the air thickened with her presence. Her armor pulsed with dark energy, and the red crown on her brow glowed with fire. Varaya tightened her grip on her blades. Dax raised his weapon without a word. The room felt frozen in time. You shouldn't have come, the Queen whispered, her voice echoing like wind through a graveyard. This is the place where blood ends. You think love or sacrifice means anything in the dark? Varaya didn't move. It means everything, she answered. Especially when it terrifies. You, the Queen snarled. She lifted her hand, and black tendrils lashed out from the walls. Dax pushed Varaya aside and opened fire. The bullets hissed through the air, lighting the dark chamber with sparks. The Queen moved faster than thought. She spun, deflecting every shot with a flick of her fingers. Varaya charged. Her blades sliced through the air, glowing with the same energy that once saved her life. The Queen parried with claws and shadows. Their weapons clashed like thunder, metal against death, fire against rot. Dax moved in from the side, aiming for the exposed joints in her armor. The Queen laughed as she turned, grabbing Dax by the throat and lifting him into the air. You are no warrior, she hissed. Just a ghost wearing borrowed strength. Dax gritted his teeth. His veins burned blue. He reached up, grabbed her wrist, and forced her arm back with pure will. The bond ignited. Varaya screamed a word in her native tongue, and her blade burst into white flame. She drove it deep into the Queen's side. The Dreth shrieked and dropped Dax, falling back with black smoke curling from her wound. But she was not defeated. She was enraged. Dark tendrils erupted from the walls, slamming into both of them. Dax crashed into a pillar. Varaya was thrown across the floor. The Queen rose, bleeding shadow, but still smiling. You're strong, she said, but not enough. You are still bound to each other. I will sever that bond with pain. She raised her arms. The ground split open. A ring of fire surrounded the chamber. The bond between Dax and Varaya flared, painfully, like something being stretched to the edge. Varaya crawled toward him, reaching out. Dax pushed himself to his feet, blood in his mouth and rage in his heart. He stood in front of her and said nothing. The queen stepped closer. Her claws crackled. "I will burn the Alari from your blood," she said. "And when you scream, I will make her watch." Dax raised his weapon one last time. But it was not the gun that gave him power now, it was the bond. Varaya whispered something. Ancient words, a prayer of unity passed from her ancestors. The gem in her chest began to glow again. Dax's eyes lit with the same light. Their pulses matched. The queen stopped moving. She looked between them, suddenly unsure. "What are you doing?" she demanded. They spoke as one. "We are not two. We are one." And then the bond exploded. Light tore through the room. A storm of blue fire and white flame wrapped around their bodies. It was not just energy. It was their souls fused through sacrifice, choice, and love. The queen screamed and struck with all her might, but her darkness shattered against their unity. Varaya flew forward, blade spinning. Dax followed with the strength of 10 soldiers. Together they struck the queen's chest. The red crown cracked. Her armor broke. Her scream was the sound of a dying sun. With one last blow, they drove her backward into her throne. And the throne collapsed. Silence fell. The fire faded. The tendrils vanished. The chamber trembled. The Dreth Queen lay motionless in the ruins of her power. Her shadow faded into ash. The war beasts across the system began to fall. The signal of death had been broken. The war at last had turned. But so had something else. Dax dropped to his knees. His breath was shallow. His skin was burning with blue light. Varaya caught him before he collapsed completely. "You gave too much," she whispered. He smiled weakly. "You were worth it," he said. The chamber shook again, and alarms blared from the ship's core. They had to get out. Varaya gripped Dax's arm tightly as the floor cracked beneath them. The queen's death had triggered the ship's core meltdown. Red lights flared. Sirens blared from the walls. Steam hissed through broken vents. The massive flagship began to tilt as its systems failed. But the portal they came through was already gone. There was no way back. Varaya looked around, searching the collapsing throne room. A memory returned. There had been an emergency pod chamber near the queen's inner sanctum. Hidden. Reserved for Dreth nobles. She grabbed Dax's shoulder. "We have one chance," she said. "Can you run?" Dax's eyes were dim, but he nodded. They ran through shattered corridors. Fire and debris fell from the ceiling. They leapt over cracks in the floor and ducked under falling beams. Varaya led the way, guiding them through the map burned into her royal memory. Dax followed, staggering but never stopping. Behind them, explosions lit the halls in burning flashes. Dreth soldiers fled in all directions. Without their queen's signal, they were no longer warriors. They were confused creatures running from fire. But one beast remained, a guardian. Twice the size of Dax, made of bone and molten metal. It stood before the pod chamber door, snarling. Its red eyes locked onto Varaya. It knew who she was, knew what she carried. The last light of the Alari bloodline. Dax pushed forward, placing himself between her and the beast. His rifle was empty. His hands burned with bonfire. The beast charged. Dax didn't wait. He met it head-on, slamming into its chest with all the force he had left. They crashed into a wall, and the beast howled. Varaya moved behind it, striking with her blade again. And again. The creature roared and threw Dax aside. Dax hit the ground hard. His bones ached. Blood ran from his lip. The light inside him flickered. Varaya screamed and struck the beast's spine. With a final burst of power, she cut through. Its core, it collapsed into ash and sparks. She dropped beside Dax and held him. The chamber door opened. Inside were 2 escape pods, just enough. But time was vanishing. The walls were melting. The countdown had begun. Varaya lifted Dax and dragged him into one of the pods. She followed and slammed the hatch shut. The pod launched just as the chamber exploded. They were flung into space. Through the window, Virea watched the Dreth flagship rip apart in a ball of fire. Pieces of the Queen's throne scattered across the stars. The ship cracked into two and vanished in a final burst of red light. The source of the enemy's power was gone. But Dax wasn't moving. She turned to him, her hand pressed to his chest. His skin was pale. The glow inside him dimmed like a fading star. She called his name, once, twice. His eyes opened slowly. He smiled barely. "We did it," he whispered. She nodded, unable to stop the tears in her eyes. "You saved us all," she said. "Not just me, all of us." Dax laughed softly. "Guess that makes me a hero." She shook her head. "You were more than that. You were my hope when I had none." His hand slipped into hers, weak, cold, but still holding on. They drifted through space for hours before Alari rescue ships found them. The capital had sent scouts to trace the Queen's signal. When it vanished, they followed the last energy flare, and there, among the wreckage, they found the escape pod. When they opened it, they found a princess reborn and a human warrior barely alive. Medical teams worked fast. Dax was taken into the care chamber, his body filled with strange energy no Alari fully understood. Virea refused to leave his side. Day after day, she sat beside his recovery tank, speaking softly, singing royal songs, and keeping his hand in hers. Her people begged her to return to the palace. The council was waiting. The throne was empty. But she stayed in the healer's hall, refusing to leave the one who had given everything for her life. She wore no crown, no armor, only silence and loyalty. Dax drifted between worlds. Sometimes he heard her voice. Sometimes he saw stars and remembered fire. But deep in his chest, something still burned. The bond. It refused to break. It held him together. It pulled him toward life again. One night, after weeks in silence, his eyes opened fully. Virea gasped and leaned close. "You came back," she said. He smiled faintly. "Didn't want to miss your coronation." Her laugh was wet with tears. "You idiot. You're still mine, remember?" He nodded weakly. "Yeah, always was." The bond pulsed between them again. Asterisk. The palace gates opened for her return. Virea walked through the scorched halls of her home, dressed not in gold or armor, but in a long white robe stitched with the colors of unity. Behind her walked the Alari people, and above them flew banners not only of royal blood, but of hope reborn. Dax followed, slower but steady, supported by his own strength. His body still carried the mark of the bond. The light in his veins had dimmed but not vanished. His steps were heavy, but his eyes were clear. He had survived death, not once but twice. They stood before the High Council. All elders rose when they entered. None dared question the Union now. The war had ended. The Dreth forces scattered. Without their queen, their hive fractured, leaving only fragments of danger. Virea had brought peace, but it came at a price. The council bowed to her and offered the crown of the Starburn, a title no Ilari had worn for centuries. It was reserved only for rulers who had restored more than kingdoms. Virea took the crown in silence and placed it on her head. Then she turned to Dax and offered her hand. In front of her people, she spoke words in both Alari and human tongue. "He gave his soul for my life. He carries our blood in his body. He is not outsider. He is part of us. He is my heart's bond and our protector." Dax looked up, unsure, then took her hand. The hall erupted in light as the bond between them was shown openly. A stream of energy circled them, not as a weapon but as a promise. Their connection was no longer secret. It was the foundation of the new peace, the bond between species, the bridge between two worlds. Later, under the stars, Virea and Dax stood. On the palace balcony, the sky was clear for the first time in weeks. Ships flew above the horizon. Builders worked in the distance, rebuilding the city stone by stone. Children laughed in the streets again. Dax leaned on the railing, breathing. In the alien air like it belonged to him now. "I don't know what I am anymore," he said. Half light, half human. Something strange in between. Varaya smiled. "You are exactly what we needed. You were the answer our ancestors didn't see coming." He turned to her. "And you? You're not the same dying girl I found under the palace floor." She nodded. "That girl died in the dark. But you pulled her into the light." For a moment they stood in silence, not from distance, but from peace. A rare kind of quiet that didn't need words. He took her hand and felt the pulse of the bond, steady and strong. A celebration followed days later. One not just for the end of war, but for the beginning of unity. Delegates from Earth arrived. Other species sent gifts and words of admiration. The human who had sacrificed everything was now the face of hope across the stars. Varaya gave her first speech as queen before a galaxy-wide audience. She didn't talk about victory. She talked about healing, about broken people who chose each other, about bridges built from blood and trust. And when she finished, she brought Dax to stand beside her. Some called it scandal, some called it divine. But all understood that the galaxy had changed. And it had changed not from weapons or fleets, but from one warrior's choice to save a stranger. To protect a dying girl simply because it was the right thing to do. As the stars turned above and the world began again, Dax asked her one final question. "What now?" Varaya looked into his eyes and answered with no hesitation. "Now we build what others were too afraid to imagine." The two of them stood at the center of a galaxy, once torn by fire and fear. What began as a last breath inside a shattered palace had become a symbol of unity. The bond between a dying alien princess and a lone human soldier had redefined what power meant. It wasn't strength in numbers or fleets in orbit. It wasn't ancient magic or pure technology. It was one soul choosing to save another. And that act had become the seed of something unstoppable. Dax joined her on every council. Not as a figurehead or trophy, but as her equal. The people called him the flame bearer, the human who carried royal fire. Alari children learned his name beside hers, in stories and songs. His blood had become part of their legacy, but the bond had effects no one could have predicted. He healed faster than any human should. His senses sharpened. He began to hear echoes in the stars, whispers of ancient memory passed down through Varaya's line. And sometimes when they touched, they could feel each other's thoughts without speaking. Scientists called it evolution. The priests called it prophecy. But Dax didn't care what they named it. To him, it was just proof that what he and Varaya shared wasn't a miracle. It was real. It was earned. And it would last. Years passed and the palace changed. Once a hall of silence and fear, it now echoed with laughter, debate, and music. Alien delegates arrived in peace. Treaties were signed under banners of silver and blue. The future had turned its face toward light again. One day, deep in the restored gardens of the palace, Varaya sat beneath a tree with Dax at her side. She placed her hand on her stomach, and he looked at her in shock. "Are you serious?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "Something new grows inside me." His voice caught. "It's possible," she smiled. The bond made it possible. A child born of both our worlds. A bridge that breathes. Proof we were always meant to find each other. The child was born under a sky filled with twin moons. She bore the white eyes of the Alari and the fire-veined skin of her father. She did not cry when she entered the world. She simply stared up at them both with ancient calm. The palace lights dimmed for a heartbeat, and all the stars outside flickered in acknowledgement. She was named Ilaren. The girl grew quickly, not just in height but in presence. Wherever she walked, silence followed. The elders whispered that the blood of a dying empire and a selfless warrior now flowed in her, and that she would change more than anyone had ever dreamed. But her parents raised her not as a weapon or symbol, but as a child who should know love before duty. And in time, when she stood where her mother once stood, when the people called her name with hope, instead of fear, Dax and Vareo watched from the shadows of the throne, no longer rulers, but proud guides who had done what no army ever could. They had ended a war by choosing to care for each other, and that choice had saved the stars.